again, what would have been common or really radical in the late 19th, early 20th century is now normal. And then Karl Marx, sorry, I just noticed that my auto spelling. So in some world that is technically correct, but not this one. So sorry about that. I always do my best editing after I publish. So Karl Marx died in 1883. And again, so me being a Gen Xer, growing up in the Cold War, I know why we don't get near him. But of the three, it's Karl Marx that has infiltrated the church the most. It's because Marxism is a heresy. There's no redemption. There's only forever guilt that you can never pay off, nor can anyone else. No matter how much you admit, no matter how much you grovel, there is no redemption. And it's also a heresy because he completely bastardizes the scapegoat. So in the Judeo-Christian worldview, the scapegoat is innocent. Right? The innocent Lamb of God. Exodus. Take a yearling lamb or goat. One without a dung eye or anything. It's a perfect one. Give it special attention. Nothing wrong with it. Passover. Generations later. Breaking the bread. Passing the cup. Same event. Passover. Radically different lamb. Still innocent. But in Marx goes back to the ancient mythical view of the scapegoat. And so this is all over Greek myth and some Roman myth too. But the scapegoat always deserves what it gets. I could name names over the past couple of years of scapegoats. I won't, because I don't know you that well. I want to still be friends. But there have been scapegoats in this country because there's this sometimes even a national anger that has to be poured out on someone or something, and that something always deserves it. So Marx, you can kind of sum up Marx in a letter that Che Guevara wrote to his wife, not knowing if he's ever going to come home, and he reminded her. He said, "Remember, there are no individuals in the revolution. It's just the revolution." So autonomy is gone, human essence is gone, just machines to be thrown away that are totally detached from any kind of reality, a la Nietzsche. What do you have left? No anchor. So if there's no anchor, you're going to have no boundary. Let me give you this quote from 2019, Roger Eyre, probably some of you are familiar with him. In an article he wrote called Seminary Confidential on what he sees as a very troubling part of mainline denominations seminaries. He says, an authentic journey is completely unshackled from biblical, theological, ethical, or community restraints unless the traveler personally chooses it. So he's not saying this is a good thing, by the way. He's saying that even people studying in what he's talking about, mainline denominational seminaries, that it's not because that the journey toward authenticity is correct and you are adapting to truth and making the choice. It's because the person wants to say, yes, I think this is what I want to do, and I'm going to get on board. Like me, you probably too have seen many churches, at least in the evangelical world, pastors, and they are broadcasting, live streaming a baptism event, an adult baptism by immersion. And I watch those and I listen to the testimony, and it sounds like the right words, but also I'm listening between the lines. And sometimes I hear, look at this personal journey I'm on, will you all affirm it? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? So if there's no anchor, there's no boundary. Now, this will make sense, I would think. And I should have told you up front that the first two are probably pretty intuitive. So if there is no anchor, then what's to prevent you from doing anything? Or, as Dostoevsky famously has one of his characters say in The Brothers Karamazov, if there is no God, anything is possible. I like to think of it, because I'm such an expert in translating Russian, if there is no God, anything is permissible. This is where, particularly now we're talking about college students, this is where college students become great experimentors. And I do not mean in the laboratory. I mean, if it can be inhaled, injected, or ingested, it might be. Just to try. Because if there's no anchor, they're trying to grasp, they're trying to get a hold of something. So why not try any of these things? This is all also where young adults, perhaps, high school, college, and beyond, and we're seeing it all over the place now. This camp that I mentioned to you, I spoke for their senior high week. This is a conservative Baptist youth camp. Right? They're not totally weird, but what I'm saying, Baptist, is like they're biblicists like you. This is a Christian camp. I couldn't believe the number of students just carrying around with their Bible notebook. They got books from their library, and they're all coming out stories. Like, all over the place. I thought, wow. I haven't spoken here in a while. I wasn't really expecting that. Well, if there's no anchor, why not? Right? I was going to say, this is where young people can decide on a daily basis who they go to bed as, separated from who they go to bed with. And those things can change all the time. Because why not? And I don't need to tell you the destructive ends of these things have taken to their logical conclusions. I had a student who wanted nothing more than to be a Pennsylvania State Trooper. He was part of the security team at the university, and the students at the University of Scranton as the second largest armed police force in Lackawanna County. They don't mess around. Right? And so to be part of the student team, that's a big deal. Well, he had a terrible breakup with his girlfriend, and there was something in her room that he thought that he had possession of, her campus room, so he used his digital skeleton key to let himself into her room to take back whatever this thing was. That act would ensure he would never become a Pennsylvania State Trooper because he abused his power. He blew his brains out in his mom's kitchen. That's not the only one I had. But if there's no anchor, why would there be another? Why? I mean, absolutely not. There's no reason for it at all. Any boundary is self-imposed, and therefore can easily be moved. And lastly, no book. What do I mean by that? I mean, we are seeing a generation now, and not just Gen Z, not just millennials, but others that are functionally illiterate. Now, I do teach at the University of Scranton. I'll be honest with you, I would not have gotten into the University of Scranton after graduating from high school. I didn't really care in high school. The kids that go there are really smart, and they're doing well on their SATs. It is pretty prestigious to be able to go to school there. It's a regionally very good school. So clearly they know how to read, right? They're doing well on their SAT scores. They clearly know how to read. What I mean is they don't know how to actually read a book. The only thing they know the only thing they know to do with a book is to mine it for data. Think of the average high school textbook. Everything is highlighted, bolded, italicized. Okay, we're giving you a study guide as you read the book. All they have to do is scan for the squiggly word, and that's it, right? And so, because the only thing they know how to do is mine a book for data, they can't connect with a narrative. Now, a reasonable question would be, how in the world did you come to this conclusion, Andy? Glad you asked. I mentioned those 4 classic texts that deal with the accusation and execution of Socrates. We read 1 or 2 of them. In my intro class, we read all 4 of them again from a different angle in my ethics class. And one of them we read is the apology of Socrates, or the defense of Socrates, his own defense at his capital trial against a jury of 500 of his peers. Do you know, every time I read that, I prep for that, I get ready to teach that, even as I'm teaching it, do you know, every time I do, I root for Socrates? Do you know how many times he's been exonerated? And that may sound ridiculous, but do you not do that reading the Gospels? Something not cry out within you, this is wrong. So my students are to read it, and then they're to come in and work to discuss it. If you ask me, how does that work? Not really well, but I'm going to keep trying it because a couple kids will do it. But early in the semester, they're still afraid of me, so they try to get their stuff done. They realize I'm kind of a pushover by this time of the year, so they're not doing anything now. But they read it, and I couldn't believe it. This happened a few years ago. They came and said, "Oh, what do you think?" And kids are putting up their hands. They said, "Well, I think Socrates kind of got what he deserved." What? Yeah. Why? Well, he did ask a lot of questions. Okay, well, maybe in North Korea, that's what you. But again, right, the liberal, free democracy, the beacon in the ancient world, right? This is one of the reasons I hit that so hard to help them see, whoa, that isn't fair. No, it's not. It may follow Athenian law, but it's not fair, and let alone just. Theological discussion for another time. And I couldn't believe it. And I thought, okay, this is a one-off, but it keeps happening. Not every student every time. I've had 1,000 students come through my classroom, so not all of them, but a good number of them. And it started reminding me of a book I was told to read in college. It did Scratch the Old Professor, everybody was afraid of. And the way he tried to get you to read something, he'd be like, "There's this great book that none of you will ever read." And I would think, well, not with that attitude. I'm not going to read this. And so he told us about a book called The Closing of the American Mind by Alan Bloom. If you have not read it, add it to your list. It's again an ancient codex, published in 1986. I found it in a used bookstore in Michigan a couple years ago, and I thought, oh yeah, so it was $1, so why not? So I bought it, and Bloom started explaining, a guy who started teaching right after World War II, he said, yeah, my students at the University of Chicago, I believe, all knew the same story. They didn't necessarily believe it, but they all knew it. And he meant the biblical narrative. They all knew it. Then he said in the tumultuous 60s, you might think it was all over. And yes, they didn't know it, but the good professor could still write the story on a malleable part. By 1986, I remember 1986. By 1986, this is my translation of it. He said their hearts were more like tungsten. Nothing sticks. Not only is it blank, but nothing sticks. And one of the things he said is because they don't know how to read. Oh, my word. That was true in 1986. It's true now. So I root for Socrates. I root for Jesus. I'm one of those nerds that reads Lord of the Rings once a year, beginning on Bilbo and Frodo's birthday. I'm not kidding. September 22nd. I have a character I root for every time. Like, guess who it is? I root for God. Do you know why? Is he a villain? This is not a trick. He is. Is he a victim? Is he redeemable? How many eagles did Gandalf send to Mount Doom in the book? 3. Did he know Sam survived? Nope. Did he know Frodo survived? Nope. Did he have knowledge that perhaps Spiegel survived? Always, brothers and sisters, send the third eagle. My son, who read Lord of the Rings as a 10-year-old, was devastated. He said, "Dad, what's your favorite chapter in the Fellowship of the Ring?" I said, "It's called Bridge of Cause of Doom." That sounds scary. We'll find out. I forgot I told him that. And I knew the day he read it because he was very upset. He was, hyperventilating. He was crying so hard. "Dad, Gandalf died." "Dad, Gandalf died." He's so upset. And I told him later, "Look, I'm really proud of you." He's like, "What?" "Dad, I was crying over a fake wizard in a made-up land and a make-believe story." "Preach, brother. I got to remind myself it's not real every time I read it." I said, "But let's talk about some things that are real. Fellowship, friendship, courage, brotherhood, leadership, love. Are those real?" "Yeah." When you sense the death of those things and the loss of a character that you connected with, "I did." "Right. I'm proud of you." Because while your friends are busy leveling up on Fortnite, or Assassin's Creed 25, whatever they're doing, I don't know what it is, you know how to connect with the story. They don't. So let us in our teaching make sure we're teaching the whole counsel of God. That we don't pick and choose, pull out and set down those things that we find interesting, amusing, or entertaining. And there is a time for specific topical things. I understand that. But we constantly have to be painting the picture of the meta-narrative. How does it all fit? Because if there is a story, there is an author. If there is an author, you and I are characters that fit in the story. It matters. Read. Read. Encourage your people to read. And if you say, "Andy, I have people that don't like that or going to get mad at me," accept it. Because you have to. Encourage your kids. So, at the end of the day, these are wolves that need to be hunted. And I suggest that when we leave our halls and when we're done singing our hymns and the bard is done telling us stories, that we visit the armory of heaven, suit up with those weapons we talked about from 2 Corinthians 10, and we step out and we hunt wolves. Not people. I've read Ephesians 6 too. I understand 6 also. I understand that. But if the battlefield is the mind and the weapons are ideas, let's get to work. Okay, I think we have time for questions.